Arabic Grammar Unpacked presents Lesson 106, Demonstratives and Elatives. This lesson will introduce two separate topics that are related only in that they make sentence structure a little confusing. Demonstratives, this, that, these, and those, and elatives, comparatives and superlatives. We have several major goals for this lesson: to learn the major demonstrative words and gender and number agreement, to differentiate between phrases and sentences with demonstratives, to use demonstratives with the pronoun of separation, to learn how to use demonstratives with Idafas, learn how to form the elative form from an adjective with the fa'il pattern, that is, most of the common adjectives such as kabir and saghir, to learn to use the elative to form comparatives and superlatives, and to learn to use the common elatives better, worse, more, and less. Let's begin with demonstratives. In Arabic, demonstratives are called asma, or names, asma al-ishara. The word ishara literally means signal, so these are signaling names. Demonstratives point at other words, this, that, these, and those. Demonstratives in Arabic can be counterintuitive to English speakers, which is why they require special care and attention. The key fact to know is that demonstratives are always grammatically definite. Take a look at a few simple examples here. We have هذا رجل طويل. هذا is a demonstrative, so it's definite, but رجل and طويل are indefinite. So this is a sentence, and we'd say this is a tall man. But in the next example, all three words are definite. هذه because it's a demonstrative, and the other two words because they have alif lam. So this is a phrase, not a sentence. This short woman. In the third example, the first two words are definite. ذلك by virtue of being a demonstrative, and ad-dars because of alif lam. But the third word is indefinite, so we know that this is a sentence, and we'd say that lesson is easy. And in the fourth example, all three words are definite again. Tilka because it's a demonstrative, and the other two because they have alif lam. So this is a phrase, not a sentence, and we would say those easy lessons. Now, in theory, this is pretty simple, but it gets kind of complicated once we move into larger sentences and phrases. So let's pay attention to the basics by beginning with the word this. Arabic has two words for this, هذا and هذه. Neither is pronounced phonetically, and the final ha of هذه is often mistaken for ta marbuta because they look alike except for their dots. Notice that هذا and هذه are both pronounced as if they have alifs after the letter ha and before the thal, and that's because long ago they did, but gradually their spelling shifted, and sometimes we will write them with a little dagger alif, a little superscript alif, in very formal text such as religious discourse, but most of the time we just leave it like this and pronounce them non-phonetically. هذا looks like هذا, but it's هذا, and هذه looks like it has ta marbuta almost, but it doesn't. It's هذه. The word هذا points at nouns that could be represented by the pronoun هو, masculine, singular, people, and objects. And the word هذه is a little trickier because it points at nouns that could be represented by the pronoun هي, not only feminine singular people and objects, but also non-human plurals, because non-human plurals are feminine singular. Let's take a look at Worksheet 1. Take it out and do some translation. Pause the video now and come back after you've filled out the blanks. Good, let's take a look at number 1. هذا الرجل. Both of these words are definite. هذا because it's a demonstrative, الرجل because of alif lam. So this is a phrase, and we would say this man. Not this is the man, like it might look to an English speaker, but rather this man. In the second example, we have هذه امرأة. هذه is definite because it's a demonstrative. امرأة is indefinite. So we know this is a sentence. We divide the mubtada of the sentence from the khabar. Go back and review lesson 104 if you want to do that. And we say this, a woman, or rather, this is a woman. In the third example, we have هذا al-Kitaab مثير. Definite by virtue of being a demonstrative, definite because of alif lam, indefinite. So this is a sentence. We divide it here. The subject is this book. What about it? It's interesting. And in the fourth example, هذه الكتب المثيرة. So here, هذه is pointing at a non-human plural noun, which we treat as if it were feminine singular, which is why we have ta marbuta on the end of al-muthira. So here, we're going to see three words that are definite. One, because it's a demonstrative. Two, because they have alif lam. So this is a phrase, not a sentence. These interesting books. So this is another tricky part. هذه can mean this when it's pointing at a singular object or person, but when it's pointing at plural objects, we would translate it into English as these. So هذه doesn't just mean this, it means this or these. Try the word that. Arabic has two words for the that points at other things. ذلك, which like هذا and هذه, is sometimes written with a dagger alif in between thal and lem. And tilka, which looks almost the same, but is pronounced quite differently. But the important thing to note here is that the English word that has multiple meanings. In fact, it's one of the trickiest words for non-native speakers of English to learn to use properly. So we don't use dhalik or tilka for that as a conjunction. A conjunction links two sentences together. I know that he's here. Or we don't use it for that as a relative pronoun, the book that we're reading, where we give additional information about a subject or topic. We only use dhalik and tilka to point at objects or people. So the word dhalik is the equivalent of hadha, the equivalent of hadhihi is tilka. They're used exactly in the same manner. The only difference is via contrast, or sometimes dhalik and tilka point at things farther away, like that and those do in English. Take a look at some examples from video worksheet 2. Translate them, pause the video, and get back. Good, let's take a look at these. Dhalik, shab, latif. So here we have definite, indefinite, indefinite. So this is a sentence. We separate the mubtada from the khabar here. So the subject of this sentence is that. What about him? He's a nice guy. Take a look at example number 2. Tilk al-fatat al-dhakiya. All three of these words are definite because tilka as a demonstrative is definite. So this is a phrase, not a sentence. We'd say, this smart young woman. In the third example, we have definite, definite, indefinite. So this is a sentence. We divide it here. Its subject is that house. What about it? It's big. And in the fourth example, tilka buyut kebira. So tilka doesn't look definite, but it is. So you might mistake this for a phrase, an indefinite phrase, at first. But it's not. It's a sentence because tilka, like all demonstratives, is definite. So we divide it here. The subject here is tilka. But here, again, we have non-human plural noun, buyut, houses. So here we would translate tilka not as that, but rather as those. Those are big houses. So again, demonstratives are always definite, and hadhihi and tilka can be tricky because of the non-human plural is treated as feminine singular rule. The Arabic word for these, when we're referring to people, is ha'ula'i, which is not pronounced phonetically at all. It's only used for human plurals, otherwise use hadhihi. So if we're talking about dogs or houses or whatever, we'd use hadhihi. We only use ha'ula'i for referring to people. Its counterpart for those is ula'ika. Say it again, ula'ika, which is difficult to pronounce and also not at all spelled phonetically. And it, like ha'ula'i, is only used for human plurals. Otherwise, use tilka. Same thing. A non-human plural is feminine singular, gives us special rules for these and those people, as opposed to these and those objects. Outside the non-human plural rule, ha'ula'i and ula'ika work just like the other demonstratives. They indicate nearby and far away groups. Note carefully that both words apply to female-only groups as well. Sometimes in very old texts you'll see variants of them, but in modern Arabic we use ha'ula for groups of people, no matter what gender they are. Take a look at worksheet number 3. Translate, pause, get back. Good. هؤلاء الرجال الطيبون. So remember, all demonstratives are definite. So all three of these words are definite, and therefore this is a phrase, not a sentence. These good men. In the second example, أولئك النساء طيبات. So definite because it's a demonstrative, definite because of alif lam, indefinite. So we put the bar here. The mubtada or subject of this sentence is أولئك النساء, those women. What about them? They're good. Or delicious also, but let's not go there. هذه مدارس قديمة. So here's هذه, which often means this, but in this case, we have a non-human plural noun, madaris, schools, and the قديمة with the ta marbuta is the dead giveaway to help you out here. So هذه is definite, madaris and قديمة are indefinite, so we divide here and we say these are old schools. So remember, هذه can mean this, and it can also mean these with non-human plurals. Over here we have هؤلاء المدرسون الجدد. So now هؤلاء is referring to the group مدرسون, teachers. Watch out because it looks almost like madrasa, school. And then al-judud, the human plural. All three of these words are definite. هؤلاء because it's a demonstrative, and the other two because of alif lam. So this is a phrase, these new teachers. We have dual demonstratives as well in Arabic. We have them for this and these, but not for that and those. I have no idea why. Like most duals, they're little used in informal speech. For masculine and mixed pairs, we use هذان for words in the marfu' case, and هذين for words in the other two cases. For feminine pairs, we use هاتان for the marfu' case, and هاتين for the other two cases. Note that these two words are spelled with an alif, but هذان and هذين aren't, because it wasn't confusing enough already, so we needed to add an extra detail here. These aren't really used in informal speech very much, but they do come up time and again, so it's useful to master them. So take a look at these. هذان الكتابان. Definite, definite. So not a sentence, but a phrase. These two books. هاتان الامرأتان لطيفتان. Notice that duals almost always rhyme, which is why they sound kind of silly to Americans. So definite, definite, indefinite. This is a sentence. These two women, what about them? They're nice. Next example, مع هذين الشخصين. So here, after a preposition, we're in the majrur case instead of the marfu' case. So we say هذين instead of هذان. Shakhs is person, so we say with, that's what ma means, these two people. And then in the last example, fi hatain il ghorfatain. We know what a ghorfa is, a room. Fi is in, so we have in these two rooms. Again, not a sentence because none of the words are indefinite. Prepositions don't count on the whole definite, indefinite thing. Moving on to demonstratives in sentences. To English speakers, phrases with demonstratives tend to look like sentences and vice versa. This is why we're spending so much time going over them. If you can keep in mind that demonstratives are always grammatically definite, however, it's easy to tell the difference between a phrase and a sentence. But for a sentence with the this is the something pattern, you need to use the pronoun of separation that matches in gender and number. Go back to lesson 104 to review the pronoun of separation if you need to, but it isn't really very complicated. Let's take a look at demonstratives in sentences. Do worksheet 5, pause, and come back. Here we have هذا رجل لطيف. Definite, indefinite, indefinite. So it's a sentence, its subject is this, and its predicate or khabar is a nice man. We divide it here and we say, this is a nice man. In the second example, هذا الرجل لطيف. So now we have rajul being definite because of alif lam, but latif remains indefinite. So we divide here instead. And now the subject of the sentence, the mubtada, is this man. What about him? He's nice. See how subtle the difference is in Arabic? We don't have little helper words like is and a to make this easy for us. So instead we have to pay careful attention to the alif lams and the definite possessive pronouns and so forth. Third example. هذا الرجل اللطيف. So here all three words are definite, هذا because it's a demonstrative, and the other two because of alif lam. So this is a phrase, this nice man. But the problem arises when we want to say this is the nice man, because we don't want to make it a phrase, we want to make it a sentence. And that's where this final example comes in. هذا هو الرجل اللطيف. So what huwa does here is separate the mubtada from the khabar and enable us to make both halves of the sentence definite. So this is the nice man. This isn't hugely difficult. It's pretty intuitive if you're actually reading it in Arabic, but sometimes it can be a little difficult to compose, especially at first, which is why we're paying careful attention to it. Now, demonstratives and idafas are a special rule, because as we've learned, normally only the final word in an idafa can be marked as definite, and demonstratives are always definite. However, we're allowed to break the rules with respect to demonstratives. It's perfectly okay for a demonstrative to go in the middle of an idafa. It's very common, in fact. This formation isn't difficult for English speakers to master, as it's generally pretty intuitive how the demonstrative relates to the other words. In fact, let's go take a couple of examples here. Do worksheet 6, pause. Good. Now let's take a look at these examples. Beit dhalik ar-rajul. Now here it doesn't look like an idafa because dhalik is definite and so is ar-rajul, but we're allowed to break the rule here. So this is a three-word idafa. The house, that man, or the house of that man, or that man's house. Bint tilkal imra'a. Same thing here. Daughter, that woman, or that woman's daughter. Hada beit tilkal imra'a. So here's two demonstratives in the same sentence, but this is done all the time in English as well. So this house, that woman, we get this is the demonstrative here, and then the house of that woman, or this is that woman's house. These are usually pretty easy to decode once you start paying attention, maybe a little harder to compose. Last example, ذلك بيت هؤلاء الشباب. That house, these guys, or this is a sentence, that is these guys' house, with the apostrophe after the S because it's plural. So this isn't super challenging from the perspective of reading, especially if you're paying attention. It can be a little trickier to put together, but with enough practice you won't have too many problems. Now let's move on to the second major topic of this lesson, elatives, or comparatives and superlatives in English. Arabic only uses one form for both comparatives and superlatives. It's called the tafdil form in Arabic, which means something like preference, or elative in English, which is purely a grammatical term and not something you'll see very often in any text. To form the elative from an adjective of the fa'il pattern, like kabir or saghir, we take the fa'il pattern and we transform it into the af'al pattern. So adjectives from other patterns will behave differently. This is rather complicated, and it will be explained in a later lesson. So we're going to stick with the simple fa'il adjectives here. Forming the elative is pretty easy for most fa'il pattern adjectives. We can take an adjective like kabir, and we can transform it into akbar. So you've probably heard Allahu Akbar before, and so we've taken big and make it biggest. So you're really saying God is the greatest, is what Allahu Akbar means. Take an adjective like saghir, we're going to apply the same transformation to it and turn it into asghar. We can take jadid, and we're going to have a little bit of a problem here because jadid comes from a doubled root. Its second and third root letters are both dal, and that means when we apply the transformation to it, we're going to get ajad instead. We're not going to get ajdad like it ought to be, but rather ajad. So watch out for adjectives that have the double root form. Double roots in general are tricky. When the last letter of the adjective is a vowel, like dhaki for smart, it transforms into alif maksura. So smarter or smartest is adhka here, with alif maksura, the dotless letter ya that is in fact an alif. So watch out for these tricky ones, but most of the time the transformation is really very simple. Let's take a look at a few very important elatives here. An old word for good is Hasan, which is why you'll often meet a person named Hasan. That's what it means, good or sometimes beautiful. So we apply the transformation to it, and we get ahsan. So ahsan can mean better or best. We don't use the word jayyid for good here. We use this older word hasan instead. Sometimes we'll use the word afdal, which means exactly the same thing, more preferable, something like that, but really better or best in standard Arabic. We can take the word sayyi, which means bad. Notice the unusual position of the hamza here. The root of sayyi is really seen waw hamza. Again, when we have waw and ya as root letters, they often behave very strangely. So it has an oddball elative, aswa. So aswa means worse or worst, depending on the context. So keep this one in mind because it's a little irregular. We also have the word kathir, which means many or a lot. It becomes akthar, which means more or most. You'll see it used a lot, and especially when we learn how to take adjectives from other forms and make elatives out of them. We're going to use akthar, and its companion from qalil, few or a little, we get aqal, which follows the same pattern as jadid and ajad, because it has a doubled root pattern. So keep these 5 words in mind. Ahsan and afdal both mean better or best. Aswa means worse or worst. Akthar means more or most. Aqal means less or least or fewer or fewest. So these are good to write down and put into your vocabulary. Let's take a look at comparatives, where we compare one thing to another. The preposition min here will stand in for English than when we're comparing two things. So it is very important to note that the elative, unlike most adjectives, never changes form for gender or number. It's akbar is just akbar. Ahsan is just ahsan. We never add ta marbuta. We never add human plural endings of any kind. We just leave it as ahsan or akbar. Elatives are also what are called diptotes. They can never take the tenween endings when indefinite, and they take fatha instead of kesra when they're in the majroor case. This is one of those details you can kind of let slip for right now and just sort of pick up as you go along. The most important feature of this part of the lesson is to learn to compare two nouns. So fill out Worksheet 7, pause, and return. Let's take a look at this example. Ana atwal, not atul like it looks, but atwal, min akhi. So ana is I, atwal comes from tawil, min stands in for than, and so we get I am taller than my brother. And this would be true if you were a woman as well. You wouldn't put ta marbuta on atwal because elatives don't change form for gender or number. In the second example, here we have a feminine person. Hiya aksaru min ukhtiha biqalil. All right, so aksar comes from qasir, short, so she is shorter than her sister, and then we add a little flavoring word here, biqalil. Qalil means few or less, so if you can guess here that this means she's a little shorter than her sister, you had the right answer. So add that to your vocabulary as well. We can use the preposition bi and modify the comparison between the two objects or people. In the third example, we have hum, human plural they. But the adjective asghar comes from saghir, and in this case, when we're referring to people, means young, not small. It doesn't change form. It doesn't add a human plural ending, even though we have a human plural pronoun, because elatives don't change form for gender or number. And then we have min, and then mudarrisihim, their teacher. So they are younger than their teacher, is what we're saying here. And then in the final example, taqdiri, my grade. Here's aswa, our oddball elative, worse or worst, min taqdir zamili. So taqdir zamili is an idafa, the grade of my classmate. So what we're saying here is my grade. What about it? It's worse than my classmate's grade. In Arabic, we don't have a way just to say my classmates with an apostrophe S. We have to put the noun we're referring to back into the sentence. Then finally, we have superlatives, better, best, more, most, and so forth. We use the same elative to establish the superlative, the same form of the same word. Again, it's a diptote, which means it can't take tenween endings, and it takes fatha rather than kasra when it's in the majroor case. It also doesn't change form for gender or number, just like when we're using the comparative. To do this, we use the rare indefinite idafa. where we put the indefinite elative before the indefinite noun. So when we see the phrase, we translate it with English the, even though both words in Arabic are indefinite. This is best learned through examples. So take a look at Worksheet 8, translate it, come on back. In the first example, we have atwal talibin fis-saf. Now we have two indefinite words in a row. Atwal, taller or tallest. Talibin. See how it has a double kasra? It's in the majrur case because it's a non-first word in an idafa, and it's indefinite because there's no alif lam or possessive pronoun or proper name here. So here we have atwal talibin, taller, tallest, a student in the class. But in English, we're going to say the tallest student in the class, even though there's no the in this sentence in Arabic, except for saf, but that's not relevant here. So what we have is an indefinite idafa. It's going to get translated into English as the superlative, the tallest student. In the second example, aksar bintin fil usra. So here we have the same thing, the indefinite idafa. Aksar, shorter, shortest, and bintin, again, indefinite majrur case, because this is an indefinite idafa. And this is the dead giveaway that we have the superlative, but we're going to translate it into English with the, so the shortest girl in the family. In the third example, at-talib al-ahsan fis-saf. So this is a variant on the theme. It is okay to use the definite noun and then make the elative definite. This looks much more intuitive to an English speaker, the best student in the class, but isn't typically what a native speaker would say. A native speaker would be much more likely to say, ahsan talibin fis-saf, like that. But this is perfectly legal, and there's nothing wrong with it, and you will see it from time to time. As long as you make the noun and the elative definite and put them in the traditional noun-adjective-word order, you'll be fine with this. So, the best student in the class. Aswa mudarrisin fil madrasa. Now notice in Arabic we have mudarris and madrasa, two nouns from the same root. To an English speaker, this looks a little twee, but in Arabic, this is really good style to use words from the same root, so watch out for this. But here's the traditional pattern, the elative and then the indefinite majrur case noun, so the worst teacher in or at the school. So these aren't hugely difficult, and they're pretty easy to get if you're paying attention and do a lot of practice, but both of them work a little strangely from the perspective of an English speaker, so it's really incumbent upon you to do your drills, pay attention, and practice these items.